Welcome back guys to my review of Crisis on Earth X and the second night of this amazing crossover. So, if you have missed my review of the first night of the crossover event, you're gonna find it linked on both the pinned comment and the end screen to this video. If you did not though, then let's get started with the second couple of hours of this crossover, because you are right where you want to be. So there were a couple of things that go to prove the showrunners meant every word they said when they stated these two nights are gonna present their very own feature films. There was the previously on Crisis on Earth X, as opposed to the usual previously on Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow. There is as well the intro that they have been working with over the course of these 4 episodes. And what it presents us with is the title of the crossover rather than the titles of each of the 4 series. But anyway, these are just little thoughts in the bigger scheme of things, cause this was a magnificent crossover all in all. It did actually deliver what the showrunners wanted it to deliver, a true 4-night crossover. And it most definitely succeeded at topping last year's crossover event. I mean, even though last year's crossover was great, last year really had a 2-night crossover masquerading as a 3-night crossover and calling itself a 4-night crossover. And even though I did love the Arrow episode on the crossover last year, it did just feel like it was another episode of Arrow. It actually felt like it had more connectivity to Inception than it had to the entire crossover. But with my opinion in general being stated here, let's dig into the core of this episode. Number 1. Modern statement. I wished I shared your sentiment, but in all my travels to distant times, one thing that sadly remains constant is man's ability to feel hatred for other men. Now that right there was yet another political statement. And while it does speak of the general trend across time and across history, it does not stop at that, but it does continue into present day. So I'd kinda say here it was a clear, clever, subtle, and effective statement. Number 2. Thawne in his wheelchair. Now that's a total callback to Season 1. His use of the past tense though in I built this place, called it home for 50 years, now that kind of goes to feed into the discrepancy that I mentioned on my review of the first night of the crossover. But speaking of references, there's also the reference to Nyssa in Alex and Sarah's conversation and a callback to their Arrow Season 2 relationship. I did love as well the reference to Earth 1 Snart on Season 3 of The Flash. Make a plan, execute the plan, expect the plan to go off the rails, throw away the plan. And the way Barry went for the Snart impression and the way Earth X Snart seems to dislike the mentality of his Earth 1 doppelganger altogether created this other funny moment on this episode. Number 3 though. It is made clear on this episode that all of this was about Overgirl being treated from what's ailing her. There is clearly a certain sadism that Earth X Kara has going on for her, but it is as well reflective of her being full of herself. I did enjoy the entire conversation that went down between the two Karas. In my opinion, it was very well acted. Number 4. More references to some quality movies were right there on these 2 episodes. For starters, the going through the ducts and the lead away McClane, that was a clear reference to one of my favorite action flicks of all time, Die Hard. I kinda grew up with that movie. And I'm not gonna lie here, I actually kinda like the Felicity-Iris dynamic going on there. The thing is, I'm not usually complaining about them for the sake of complaining, or because of any personal bias against either characters or actresses, or the sex they belong to. I actually do so because of the bad writing for the characters, and I've gotta admit here, this sequence was very well written. But we also had Harry and the ball he kept bouncing annoying the shit out of Cisco. Now that was very Hills on The Great Escape, which also happened to be a Nazi fighting based movie. Iris' Come With Me If You Wanna Live Upon Saving Sarah was as well a reference to like every installment of the Terminator series out there. Number 5. Quentin Lance and Sarah Lance in the concentration camp. Now that was quite the entertaining scene to watch. Paul Blackthorne really managed to bring out the Nazi in the role with how he expunged his daughter, the Earth X version of Sarah, from his family line forever. That execution part of the scene though, that felt totally weird. And all I could think right there was the only way out of that was if someone were to come to the rescue from Earth 1. But that was all because, number 6, I totally forgot that Leonard Snart was making an appearance on the crossover. Now this version of Leonard Snart is Citizen Cold rather than Captain Cold. Now as opposed to the villainous comic book version of Leonard Snart, Citizen Cold is the more heroic version of the character, one that we've read about over the pages of the Flashpoint arc in the comics. And even though he has nothing to do with Earth 10, the Earth X equivalent in the comics, I really loved how they utilized one of the many aspects of Flashpoint that they totally ignored on Season 3 of The Flash. But Snart's rescue of the team finally brought us number 7, The Ray. Now early on in the events of the episode, we got to meet Ray Terrell, who was incarcerated in this concentration camp because he loved the wrong person. However though, at this point in the events of the episode, his power dampening cuffs were off and he was getting down to business. And just as indicated by that scene, Ray's abilities in the comics include transformation into this light energy form, the generation of light rays, and flight. But then there was yet another surprise when it comes to him. Just like Thawne, he's originally from Earth 1. Number 8 though. What I thought was the Ray Cave, but ended up being the Resistance Cave, is basically the Arrow Cave from Earth 1, only seemingly not as advanced as the latter. The introductions were quite funny, especially with Oliver being referred to as the good doppelganger of the Führer. There was also Snart repeatedly hitting on Sarah. Now that was a total callback to their relationship on Season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow. It was also a callback to how he got through her tough exterior, evidenced by that kiss they shared at the vanishing point right before he died. Now almost every statement made by Snart over the course of his appearance on the second part of the crossover is quite a laugh out loud moment. I think the moment that got me to laugh the most with Leonard Snart was his reference to the Earth 1 team on Earth X as those poor, strangely dressed individuals. Now there was as well Earth X Win making his debut with the beard and all that seriousness. And apparently, freedom fighter General Schott wants to separate the Nazi armies from their Oliver Führer by destroying the only gateway that could take them back to Earth 1. Win as well informs them that the Nazi supervillains have got a doomsday weapon powerful enough to affect other worlds. Now is it me, or does that sound like something that could be used to create a Crisis on Infinite Earth event? At least a hint towards that. I mean, the mere mention of that does open a wide gate for one major possibility in the future of the Arrowverse. But anyway, Win's weapon of choice in destroying the Nazi plans happens to be number 9, Meet Red Tornado, the comic book JSA and later on Justice League member with the ability to switch at will between his human and android forms. He's also known for his superhuman strength and his power of wind manipulation. Number 10 though, the conversation that goes down where Stein lets Jax know how he views him as a son. That was just a perfect conclusion to the goodbye drama that I discussed in my review of the first night of the crossover. Victor Garber's acting is definitely gonna be missed. Number 11, your cousin, really? Fun tidbit, I fought your cousin once in the future. He's fast, I'm faster. Now Eobard's statement right there, that was interesting to say the least. So just like the Doomsday weapon felt like it was teasing a possible Crisis on Infinite Earth at some point down the road, this one kinda teases a possible future crossover in which we'd see both Superman and Thawne. Number 12 though, Oliver almost having to kill Earth X Felicity, killing everyone else instead and saving her. That was a pretty good action sequence on an episode that more or less lacked on those. But we were just given yet another powerful action sequence on Earth X later on in the events of the episode, with 1, Lance returning to face the team with an army, and 2, Barry and the Ray trying to stop the Red Tornado. It just kept feeling that the crossover kept getting better and better. I wonder how they're gonna top this one next year. But I really love the chemistry that Barry and Ray had working together there, especially as they stopped the Red Tornado. Number 13 though, a Nazi Wave Rider. Now that's the Nazis' doomsday device, and it has made its way to Earth 1. Now even before anyone referred to it as a Nazi Wave Rider, I called it that. So I'm guessing I should start naming villains with Cisco. Number 14. Enter the Legends. Now it was so funny how Ray Palmer there was pushing the knife away from Kara's chest as Eobard was attempting to cut her open. Seriously though, we were talking an amazing touch of comedy on the first 3 episodes of the crossover event. But the Legends, they added a whole new level to that, and in an amazing Legends vs. the Nazis sequence. Number 15. Okay, I don't remember laughing this hard since forever, but Dinah's reference to Metallo as a Terminator, followed by Cisco's laughter, and his "I just love a good pop culture reference in a moment of crisis," that had me on the floor. Loved though how they all gave it to Metallo right after that moment and shredded him into his component pieces. And his exploding head, that was yet another Terminator reference. Number 16 though, Martin's conversation with Jefferson about splitting, letting him die, was quite the sad moment, quite the touching moment. How could a father do anything less? In my opinion, that was pretty much the most touching death so far on all seasons of all 4 shows. And it just kept getting more touching and more of a tearjerker for a bit there. But you could also tell at that point that Martin's death was gonna be a huge motivation for all of these superheroes, enough for them to fight back and win. We cannot bring Marty back, but we can protect the city he loves and the family he left behind. But does anyone else think of Marty McFly every time someone refers to Stein as Marty? Number 17 though. So the battle for Earth 1 starts, presenting us with one hell of an action sequence, fighting all those Nazis. Heroes against villains, and Wave Rider against Wave Rider. Now over the course of that sequence there was a lot of events and a lot of references. There was the Star Raiders Atari reference, and I remember playing that when I was like 7 or 8. One of my favorite parts about this specific sequence was all about the Flash and the Reverse Flash fighting one another. That never gets old. Their fight ending in, "I wonder which face I'll be wearing next time we meet." That just felt like a flat-out promise we'll be seeing the Reverse Flash once more on The Flash. And it happens to be one of the best things we came out of the crossover event with. But there was also Caitlin gliding on a bridge of ice with Zari and Amaya all the way up to the Nazi Wave Rider. Now this is not the first time we saw Caitlin do that. I mean, she did it once before on The Flash Season 3 once she went full on Killer Frost. However though, it is one of those things that will never get old as well. But Green Arrow versus the Führer as well was a pretty solid fight. Didn't expect Oliver would end up putting an arrow in him by the end of it. But when you kind of think about it, that guy was a big threat. He showed Oliver the worst version he could ever be, and it wasn't pretty. Now there was Kara's "General, you care to step outside?" That was a reference to Superman 2. But on the subject of Earth X Kara, does every Kryptonian who go bad love themselves the title of General? Now quite before that fight came to happening, we came to realize that Overgirl is as well a weapon on her own. And she is sort of set on a course of explosion capable of destroying the universe if she were not to get that heart transplant. So besides the Kara v Kara fight being pretty good, the meltdown Overgirl has was another highlight. And so Kara has to fly her up, up, and away, which is a reference to like a zillion things. There's a 1968 commercial, and there's also the weird balloon song. But what I think they meant there was the post-Infinite Crisis 8-issue Up, Up, and Away Superman arc. Finally though, Kara falling back to Earth after the explosion of Overgirl was a reference to Brandon Routh falling back to Earth at the end of Superman Returns. It was also sort of a reference to last year's crossover, where Superman Returns was actually referenced as well. Back then, Ray Palmer stated that Supergirl kinda looks like his cousin, which kinda refers to his role as Superman on Superman Returns. Number 18 though. Now another hint at things to possibly come was Barry's. If you ever need us to do any punching over on Earth X, let us know. So besides the Earth 1 guys possibly being voiced on the Ray animated series, there's always the chance the Ray might be back at Earth 1. It's either that or the Earth 1 superheroes might end up visiting Earth X on future episodes or crossovers. Leonard Snart, however, sticks around on Earth 1 as Ray goes into the portal. And with Leonard Snart possibly never coming back to the Arrowverse, I'm guessing this was the show's way of ensuring he's at a distance from all of them. At least now, they won't have to explain why he's not with the Ray on the CW Seed series. Number 19 though. Martin's funeral close to the end of the crossover event, that was very touching as well. Jefferson though was a very well acted character throughout this whole situation with Stein dying. He really did manage there to take his acting to a whole new level of emotional with the sequence. I mean, even Meg cried there. And that grave was Martin's grave. That was kind of the trick there, I suppose, with the Felicity Smoke tombstone that was leaked a couple of weeks ago. I'm just guessing it was all about misdirection. Number 20. Now, Diggle wasn't there for the crossover because of his current situation. He was, however, hanging out back in Star Labs, but it wouldn't be a crossover without Mary pushing him into throwing up. Now, that made the crossover even more perfect than it already was, even though I didn't think it needed more to get to perfection. But finally though, number 21. Don't forget to say I do. And the fact they actually forgot to say I do, that kind of went to confirm that the waitress on last week's episode was from the future. So the possibility she's WestAllen just became stronger. And whether we like, dislike, or hate Iris, their vows were pretty good. It was quite the lovely wedding, even though it wasn't what they intended. Kind of liked how she ended up telling him that the Flash isn't really her hero, but is rather Barry himself, Flash or not. That kind of made up for her second time saying, "We are the Flash," on last week's episode. But yes, you were seeing straight there. That did happen as well. Oliver and Felicity just got married right there, so we gotta live with it. Hopefully though, and except for the bad writing for her on the first night of the crossover, Felicity does end up being written better on future episodes. But there it all was, your 2 weddings and your funeral, as promised. Now I am going to be discussing these weddings in detail on a future video of mine. But until then, that brings me to the end of my extremely long review of the second night of the crossover. Hope you enjoyed both the crossover and this review. In my opinion, that was the best crossover ever. So let me know in the comments what you thought of the crossover, and if I have missed any references, callbacks, or Easter eggs on this video. Let me know as well if you like the content of this video by dropping it a much appreciated like. And remember, it is always much appreciated as well if you subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos. But until I see you next time, thank you all for tuning in and have a good one.